Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into an idea that, well, it challenges pretty much everything we think we know about our climate strategy. It's a concept called the incomplete mitigation paradigm.
So let's just get right to it. For decades, we've been told the answer is mitigation, cutting our emissions. But what if that's only half the story? What if our entire strategy is set up to fight a battle it can't ever actually win?
This leads us to what the source material for this explainer calls the mitigation dead end. See, the problem isn't the effort, it's the approach itself. It's fundamentally reactive, it's defensive, and that might just be a trap.
Okay, think about it like this. On one side, you have our current paradigm. It's all about fighting symptoms, right? Chasing down CO2 molecules, trying to reflect excess heat back into space. It's pure defense. But what if we could play offense? What if we could stop just fighting the problem and instead actually transform it? Imagine taking all that waste heat in the atmosphere and turning it into something valuable.
There's a line from the research that just nails this idea. It says, the current approach is a perpetual struggle against a symptom, not the re-engineering of a system. And that's really it, isn't it? We're stuck in this loop, just patching leaks in a system that's fundamentally broken, instead of trying to build a new one.
So, okay, if the old way is a dead end, where do we go? This is where a completely different way of thinking comes into play, a new thermal paradigm. The goal here isn't just to manage heat anymore. The goal is to convert it.
And at the core of this new way of thinking is a technology concept called atmospheric thermal conversion, or CTA. It's a really profound idea when you break it down. Take something we have way too much of, a huge liability, like all this excess heat trapped in our atmosphere, and literally turn it into a usable asset. It's about creating value directly from the problem itself.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth would that even work? Well, the concept boils down to three basic steps. First, you capture what's called a thermal gradient. That's just a fancy way of saying you tap into the natural temperature difference between the warm air near the ground and the much, much colder air way up high. Second, you use special thermoelectric materials to turn that heat difference straight into electricity. And then third, you beam that energy back down to where it's needed, maybe using something like microwaves.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty. These are the key operating parameters for the prototype design. It's built to harness a 50 Kelvin or a 50 degrees Celsius temperature difference. And the real magic is supposed to come from these materials with a thermoelectric figure of merit, we'll just call it ZT, of 1.4. You can think of ZT as just a simple score for how well a material can convert heat into power. With these specs, the team projected a total system efficiency of about 2.5%.
Okay, so that's the theory, that's the blueprint. But how did it actually stack up in the real world? This is where things get really interesting, because the results revealed both this incredible potential and a trade-off that is just impossible to ignore.
So, after all the testing, the final validated total system efficiency for the prototype came in at 2.4%. Now, I know what you're thinking. 2.4%? That sounds awful, right? Especially when you compare it to a modern solar panel. But hold on, because that number is seriously deceptive.
Now, this table is where that 2.4% starts to make a whole lot more sense. Yeah, look at the efficiency column. It's way, way lower than solar or wind, no question. But now look at the column right next to it, capacity factor. That is the number that changes the entire story.
And this really gets to the heart of it. What we're looking at is a fundamental choice, a core trade-off. On one side, you've got your solar and wind, super high efficiency, but they're intermittent. They only work when the conditions are just right. On the other side, you've got this CTA concept. It sacrifices that raw efficiency for something else, near constant availability. Because that temperature difference in the atmosphere, it's always there, day and night.
This right here, this is CTA's superpower. A typical solar farm, a really good one, might hit a capacity factor of 25%. Wind, maybe 32%. But this prototype? It clocked in at 87%. 87%. That means it's running, making power almost all the time. That's the game changer. And that's why we're even talking about a technology with such a low efficiency number. But all that uptime, that incredible availability, it comes at a cost.
And I mean a very, very high cost. Which brings us to the last piece of this story, and frankly, it's a sobering one, the scalability challenge. This is where the big idea slams into the hard wall of reality.
Just look at this chart. This shows the levelized cost of energy, basically the all-in price to generate power. Wind is down here at around 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Solar, about 6 cents. Even something a little more exotic like OTEC is 20 cents. And then there's CTA. The projection for this prototype is a jaw-dropping $1.45. This is, without a doubt, the single biggest mountain it has to climb.
And it's not just the cost. The validation work flagged 3 other major limitations. First, obviously, is that efficiency gap we've been talking about. It's just way behind the curve. Second, to get better, it needs new materials, thermoelectrics with a ZT score over 3.0. And those, well, they don't really exist yet, not outside of a lab. And third, it's got a bit of an Achilles heel when it comes to weather. Its performance can nosedive by more than a third if you've got heavy rain or thick fog.
But you know, even with all of those red flags, there is a serious plan here. The documentation lays out this really ambitious 10-year roadmap. It shows a clear path from the lab bench prototype all the way to, potentially, large-scale global production. The vision is there, but the road to get there is, wow, it's long, and it is going to be incredibly expensive.
So after all of that, we're left with this really fundamental choice, this dilemma. This idea, CTA, represents a whole new way of thinking, a way to maybe turn our biggest environmental problem into a solution. But it's also inefficient, wildly expensive, and relies on tech that's not even ready yet. And that brings us right back to where we started, but with a sharper focus. When you're facing a crisis on a global scale, what's the bigger risk? Sticking with a flawed paradigm that we know is incomplete? Or investing in a costly, unproven one that at least tries to re-engineer the entire system? There's no easy answer to that.